Thank you for joining today's podcast. Today, you'll get to hear a conversation I had with Jeff Johnson. Jeff obtained his bachelor degree in criminal justice from the University of Georgia, Go Dogs, and his master's degree in human resources from Georgia State University. Jeff has over 25 years of experience in the field of organizational and leadership development and change management. He has worked in various industries, including the Department of Defense, healthcare, and insurance, and spent the last 18 years working in the Dallas, Texas area for PepsiCo. Jeff is a dear friend of mine, and I've always valued his wisdom, his counsel, and just his ways of approaching life and life's challenges. You are going to love this conversation. I learned so much, and I hope you will as well. Enjoy.
Now available. You deserve to love your job. How to find your purpose and enjoy your life. You may not have learned this growing up, but you deserve to love your job. You will spend more time at work than in any other activity in your life, and you deserve to love it. Research tells us that people who love their work are twice as likely to enjoy their life. This book will help you create a blueprint to help you fulfill your purpose, love your job, and live the life you were designed to live. Now available at Amazon.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for joining today's podcast. I am super excited about this because this topic just seems so critical. And actually something you just said before we jumped on, like I was thinking it was timely, but I think your word that it's timeless is probably more accurate, because certainly the last few years have been tough for everyone, but life is tough. Pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, life can be tough as well. So I think it's a really important topic. And I was thinking the other day, I think it's probably 12 years ago, maybe, probably more than that, when we were working together and you were like researching, putting together a training for this topic. So I know it's something that you've just known about, thought about, been invested in for years. So thank you for joining and for having this conversation today for everybody.
So happy to do it. Yeah, it doesn't matter what life stage you're in. I think the notion of resilience is in fact timeless. So yeah, happy to be a part of it. I've spent the better part of my career in this place. So I love the topic.
Yeah, I know you do. I was thinking about that. I was like, oh my gosh, that was at least 12 years ago, maybe more if I'm dating myself correctly, maybe a little more. So let's jump in and maybe just start with telling us, like, what is resilience? Like, just what is it?
Speaking of dating yourself, so as I was preparing for this, the thing that I kept coming back to is remember the roly-poly toy, the Weebles, and the tagline is
yes,
Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down.
Yeah.
Heck of a way to kick this thing off. But I do think it speaks to the notion of resilience. I think, some days just, they suck. I mean, everything just feels off. Feels like somebody flicks you and caused you to get knocked back.
Yeah.
But resilience is the ability to get back up and bounce forward. And I don't think it matters, the kind of loss that you're going through. Maybe it's a loss of a loved one, maybe it's the loss of a job, maybe it's the loss of a marriage or any other bad news. But you get knocked back, and what do you do from that moment? And I think the key is you acknowledge it. You hope you learn something from it, but ultimately you try to move forward at a pace that's, I think, right for you, because each of us are going to have a different pace. So what's right for you?
I actually love that analogy, the Weeble Wobbles, because
people are going to go look it up.
Everyone who was born much later than us is probably like, what are you talking about?
You can Google it.
Exactly. But I love that because I think that also reminds us that being down can be temporary, because when you think about the Weeble Wobbles, like they come back up. And I think when you're in a really tough place, you have to remind yourself of that sometimes, that this is temporary. This is where I am right now. To your point, acknowledging it, being true about how you feel about it, but also reminding yourself that this can be temporary. Like this can be a temporary situation. So what do you think? What interests you most about this topic? Like I said, I know you've been researching this and teaching this honestly for years. What interests you most about this?
I think the idea of helping people unlock because I think when change happens, regardless of the degree of it, I think our instinct is to say, I can't do it. I feel stuck. As human beings, we just say, I can't. My first answer, I can't do it.
Yeah.
So the passion of it is, how do you help yourself and others make, just some sort of unlock that sees a path to get to the other side of it, or at least to a place that's more manageable.
Yeah, because it is easy to resist the more difficult days, or resist the changes we don't like. Yeah, and then it's pretty easy to get stuck in those places if we allow ourselves to.
That's right. And I think that's key. If we allow ourselves to, and we don't have to, even if some days are hard, what are the little baby steps we can take that move us a little bit more forward?
So how would you know if you're a resilient person? Like, I think I'm pretty resilient, but I don't know. Like, how would someone know if they are resilient, or a pretty resilient person, you think?
I thought this was a really good question, and I really gave this some thought. And I don't have an assessment to offer. Perhaps you have one, but I don't have
I don't.
Note to self. But I broke it down into two things. One is time, and one is the direction you're facing. And I think there's something to learn about resilience here. Let's start with time. I'm not talking about the time to get over it per se, but the amount of time that you spend wallowing in the loss. Not just visiting, not just visiting the pain, but where you're fully immersed. You're almost drowning in it, and you can't seem to focus on anything else. It's how long you stay there in that moment, I think, speaks how resilient you are. I mean, yes, it clearly depends upon the weight of the loss, the size of it. But the less time we spend in that deep immersion, I think allows for steps forward. Again, even if it's baby steps, it's a sign of resilience. So I think that's one thing. When I think of time, that's where my brain went.
Yeah. Okay.
The other thing that I think around resilience and how you know if you are or not is what direction you're facing. I don't know if this will make sense, but let's try it. Think of a continuum. Imagine one of, let's say, a 0 to 100. And let's say that continuum represents a loss of a job, a divorce, some massive project that you're leading, where 0 is the starting point. And let's say 100 is the proverbial finish line. When you get to the other side, or when you get to a place where you can comfortably manage it, or a place where you feel okay, right?
Yeah.
So if related to resilience, if you're standing at 0, are you facing toward 100? Or are you facing toward -50? And I think that direction is really key. If I'm at 0 and my arms are crossed and I'm like, heck no, not today, no way, not going to happen, then I'm probably not feeling particularly resilient, and I'm facing away from the change. I'm not ready to take it on. But if I kind of move from heck no to, okay, I may not get far, but I'm looking toward 100, and I'm going to take 1 or 2 steps that way. Now I'm doing the work, and that shows me whether I'm being resilient. I don't know, just as I thought about the question, those are the 2 places that I went, time and direction.
Yeah. I mean, yes, I could see both of those. I mean, time to be from the perspective of, I think the more we can lessen the time, not saying, to your point, it depends on the weight of the loss, but the more you can lessen the time, then the more time you have to be on that looking forward. What direction are you looking? I think that's a question we could ask ourselves probably on day to day, just in the midst of the day, like, which direction am I looking? Am I looking back, or am I looking forward to what could be, what I expect, or what I hope? Or, I mean, yeah, because when you're in a difficult time, it's so easy to really look back. I mean, to look toward what you lost, what you miss, and not that you shouldn't do it. Yeah. Yeah, not that you shouldn't do it, but the resilient side of us is like, how do we look forward to what could be, what's in front of us? That's really important.
I think people have to do the work when they look back, but that's where the time aspect came. Like, how long do you spend there though? because the longer you're there, the harder it is then to kind of get yourself out of it. And so it's just being intentional and aware of, okay, it's okay to visit there, but when I start living there a little longer than I should, or longer than that is healthy, then I really need to figure out a way to turn away from the -50 back toward the 100.
Yes, yes. You know, and I don't think anywhere I heard this recently. This was just something I heard, but someone was sharing, I don't know, it might have been Dr. Phil for all I know, but he was kind of sharing this idea around how we can lose time, meaning, you know, let's say we move 5 steps back. Well, instead of taking 5 steps forward, well, once we're 5 steps back, now we got to come 5 steps forward and then move 5 steps forward to get where we wanted to be. So every moment we spend kind of going backwards, we're losing time to where we could be on your continuum of like that 0 to 100. So we could lose, you know, 15 steps by going back 5, because you got to go back 5, you got to come back 5, and you got to get to the 5 you were at before. So I think that's something really for people to think about. Like, how are you spending your time, and are you spending your time looking in the direction you want to be?
That's really interesting, because if you learned something by taking the 5 steps back that you didn't have before, then it was valuable.
Fair. Yes. I love that. Yes. Yeah. Because sometimes you do have to go back. That's really fair. I love that. So then let's say we're thinking, you know what? Yeah, I've spent maybe, you know, as you said, related to a loss, a project, just how we're feeling right now. And we're saying, I want to be more resilient. Like, I want to spend less time, you know, at 0. I want to look towards what it is I want. Like, what are some things we can do to increase our resilience?
A couple of things on this one. And I think it depends upon the degree of loss.
Yeah.
I think our knee jerk when something hard happens is for us to say we can't, which leads me to my first idea, which is, and I'll underscore, double down on this one because it's so powerful, is to pay attention to the self-talk, the power of self-talk. And each of us, I know we've talked about this before, each of us have this little internal voice, right? You know, one sits on this shoulder and one sits on this shoulder. It's the angel who says, oh, you really did a nice job. That was such a great presentation. You were great on Arlene's podcast. Such great answers. And there's the other one, that devil over here, that says, man, you were awful. Those were terrible answers. What were you thinking? Man, you're just an idiot. I mean, like, and they're both there. But the thing is, I think they both influence our ability to move forward and to be and to feel resilient. So what I'd say to people is, when you hear the voices, you know, they're there, and people are telling themselves right now as they're listening to this, I don't have those voices. Well, they clearly do. They're talking to themselves about not having voices. We all have them, but pay attention to it. How is it influencing your body? How is it making you feel? And how does it make you, how does it influence your decision making? Right? Because if you asked a couple, is it helping me take 1 step forward or the 5 steps back that you were just talking about? You know, like doing that mental homework. Because I think there's a bunch of research out there that would tell us people hear the negative voice louder than the positive.
Yeah.
And I would only offer that you just got to pay attention to that and make sure you turn the volume up on the positive. At least give it equal time, right?
Yeah.
I think the first thing is the self-talk. The second thing I think in help and resilience is to break it down. This is not a new concept. There's plenty of people who have talked about this, but how do you break it down into something smaller and more palatable? If you look at something in its entirety, it's really hard to have the perfect answer for how you're going to solve it or how you might approach it. It just feels overwhelming. And I don't have that bite-sized chunk, you know, to figure it out. I'll give you an example. You were talking about COVID earlier. And in the role that I have now during the height of COVID, one of the jobs that I had was to lead this cross-departmental team to figure out how we were all going to return to the office. Not how we were returning to work, because everybody was still working, but how are you going to bring everybody back to the office in this very dynamic situation? And the tension that was there, the tension with the science, the tension with what the business wanted, and the tension with what the people were willing and not willing to do.
Yeah.
But my job was to sit in this chair and figure out how to bring these elements together and come up with the plan.
Mhm.
And I thought, I have no idea how I'm going to do this. I don't understand the science. I don't understand the health, the environmental safety aspects of it, which were things that influence these decisions. So when I looked at it, long story short, when I looked at it in its entirety, it was overwhelming and it stressed me out.
Yeah.
But when I broke it down to this week's agenda, like, okay, what departments need to be represented? Who's going to be the representative from that department? What are the topics and what are some of the key questions we need to answer? Then it became far easier to navigate. So taking it from this massive thing that was overwhelming to this week's agenda helped me because I was overwhelmed by it. I'll fully own that. Last thing I'll say, and then I'll stop, is this notion of self-reflection. You've heard the term slow down to go fast. Again, that's been around for a while, but I think many of us have this bias for action where we jump in before we really know how deep the water is. Yet I think sometimes, and when we slow it down, there's questions that we ask that actually might help us figure out if it's the right path forward or not. As in, have I done this before? What can I draw from? Who can I reach out to? Who do I know that's been through this before? What resources might be available? So like a couple of key questions that helps me think about the problem before I just jump in. Those are three things that I think that help build resilience.
Yeah, that last one too. Like, I mean, I feel like they're all very practical things we can do, which is, the self-talk. Like, what are we saying to ourselves, and what are we rehearsing in our minds that other people say? Like, are we rehearsing the positive things, or are we constantly rehearsing the negative things? Like that self-talk, breaking it down to smaller things. Yeah, breaking it down to smaller segments. And then, I mean, yeah, I've been talking to a lot of people about just thinking slower and being slower to say yes to things. I know we'll get to this later, but that kind of goes to this. You put yourself in difficult situations sometimes by saying yes too fast, or not thinking through it, or to your point, jumping in with both feet and then realizing this water's super deep for me. Yeah, I mean, those are so just practical. And I feel like that's things we deal with every day. Like, we have to be on our self-talk every day. We have to constantly be trying to break things down. And we absolutely have to be thinking slower about things, just to help us be more effective in those areas. That makes so much sense to me.
I think the more we know ourselves, like I know that I'm guilty of speaking before I think. So I know this about myself. So if I can slow that down, because how many times, raise your hand if you've had those times when you wish you had a do-over. Man, I wish I hadn't said that.
Yes.
But if you just stop for a minute, and the visual I use is before you run out the door, add a screen door. Just
right.
You add one extra door to before you're going outside to make sure there's not any rain.
Look out that door before you walk out there with those words.
Put a peephole out there or something.
Yes. Oh, that is so good. You're right. That we could all do that 1,000 times over, probably.
That's your next book. Add the screen door.
Add the screen door. Actually, I don't know. That could work. That could work. So then, like, what do you think about, are there things we can do to increase resilience in others? Because sometimes, and I've experienced this a lot over the last year, sometimes it's things we're going through, but sometimes you see other people going through really tough times. And, our level of maybe influence over those people may vary. Sometimes it might be people on our teams. It could be just friends. It could be children, which you probably have more influence over. But is there anything you've either done or heard people do that maybe is about, how you can encourage this or encourage other people to be resilient as well?
This is going to sound awful. I'm afraid it's going to sound awful. My intent is good. I'm positive. I promise.
I know that. Yeah.
I don't want to wish any bad on anybody, but the thought here is I think we kind of need some rough experiences to see what we're made of. And I think a way to encourage resilience is to draw from or pull from those experiences once we have them. Our daughters are similar age. Yours is, a year older than mine, but my daughter's an incoming freshman and a 13-hour drive away from where we live.
Yeah.
So as I think about her life stage, this is the first real test of adulthood. She's never been this far away for this long. Let's call it practicing independence, right?
Yes.
So not practicing, living independently, right? And it's a chance for her to see what she's made of, to see how she handles it. So I don't wish ill will on anybody, but the thought is you have to experience something first to know how to find your way out of it. And I think what we can do as friends, as mentors, as parents, is to encourage them to feel it. Encourage them to name it. Give yourself permission to feel whatever it is you feel, because I'm not going to tell you you're wrong for feeling it.
Right.
You feel what you feel, right? But if you sit with it, if you try to understand it, if you're able to articulate what it is you can feel, almost to the point where you can name it, I am scared, I am confused, I am overwhelmed, then I think it's easier to make sense of. To play the role of coach, mentor, it requires me to have my eyes open. Like I need to know or sense something about you, somebody I care about, that something's not right. Like maybe I need to give you a path, like, hey, you feeling okay today? Like something feels a little bit off. Like give license, give a pathway for them to share whatever it is they share. Don't be in my own head. Don't be in my own drama for the day. If I truly want to help somebody else to be resilient, give them a pathway to talk to you. And I think I would add to I would encourage them to be open to new angles. Hopefully this makes sense, but if people would let others ask them questions, and help lead them to self-discovery, then I think it might help them. In other words, I'm not close to your problem. I don't have the same emotional weight as you are going through the loss you're going through. But maybe I can ask you a question. Maybe I can offer up a point of view that is different than what you're thinking. It's a different angle on something. It maybe provides an alternate path for how you bounce forward. So those are a couple of things. I mean, the last one might be write it down. If somebody's going through something, literally writing it down. Capture the real, the raw, the not yet understood. Because maybe in the moment you don't understand it, but if you go back and reread it, maybe you see the progress that you've made. Because I don't know about you, but I think most things I feel today look a little different tomorrow or a week from now or a month from now. I don't know, a couple of random thoughts.
Yeah. No, what's so funny about this is that is not the answer I was expecting. And I really love it. And
Awesome.
let me tell you why I think that's so helpful just to me personally, which is I think a lot of times when we see people and I'll say for myself, when I see people in difficult circumstances, instead of like, your approach is like an empathetic approach. It's like helping them really understand where they are, what they're feeling, kind of not try to push past it, but to actually go through it. Essentially, like, let me understand what I'm feeling. Let me understand where I am, what's hard about this, like not try to just kind of pretend it's not there and move past it. Not that I would think you would encourage that, but I think that's kind of been the approach I've had a lot of my life, which is like, let me compartmentalize this in a box so I can then, try to get on with the rest of my life. And I probably called that resilient, but that's not really resilient because, by the way, that box comes up later. You're walking and then you're stumbling over the box like, oh my God, I didn't know that was still a thing. So this, just not trying to force people past where they are, and just like, if that's where they are, just being with them in that space. It's a much more empathetic, I think, and probably helpful approach than trying to push people, which is not what you're saying. You're saying kind of be empathetic with them in that space, help them understand where they are, offer an alternative idea. But but we're not trying to push people because people are on their own paths and journeys, and
well, this is where you try to push me. I'm going to go, heck no, not today. And what we want them to do is kind of take their arms down and say, okay, this hurts. This is painful. But I'm going to take a step toward that 100. And I want to make sure I comment about your box, because I have this visual too. The box is what you make of it. I mean, if you put a little pretty bow around it and you put it on the shelf and it's all nice and decorative, it's not a bad box. But you still have to go visit it periodically and go check on it to see if you've done the work or not, right? It just can't sit there and collect the dust.
Right. Yes. Which is, I think, what most of my boxes have done. Until they open themselves. I never want to open them until they open themselves, then I got to deal with it. But yes,
them off to some storage unit somewhere, never to be seen again.
Never to be seen again. End scene. I'm done with that. But that's not real. That's not real. They're still there. There's still things you have to deal with. So I just love this approach of being empathetic. And I think that could work when we're talking about just the age of our daughters. Like, I think that works more with that young adult group. It certainly works better with adults. No one wants to be told what to do. And honestly, we don't know what they should do because we're not living their life, truth be told. So this kind of, let me just be empathetic, offer a different perspective, but let them walk their own path. That just makes so much more sense, honestly.
I think people are more receptive to it when they have the idea. There's a lot of work right there. It happens in corporate America all the time. Somebody else's idea gets, put through, but it's, a direct report somewhere, it's their idea. We don't listen to it, It's the exact same idea. But if it comes from you, it just makes it easy. Oh, I get it. Self-discovery. I can move. It's my aha moment.
Yeah. I love that. So you've used this term a couple of times, and I know we've talked about it before, a term you shared with me of bouncing forward. And we talked about a little bit, but in general, just share what you think that means. Did you have a kind of personal example that led you to that? Like, what are you talking about when you use that term bouncing forward?
I did. The catalyst for this is my mom passing away about 12 years ago. And a close friend of mine told me, write things down. And so I did, which is one of the reasons I'm, paying it forward. Write it down. It may not work for everybody, but in my scenario, I literally captured every detail I could remember, from the first call I got from my dad saying she'd had a stroke, to the funeral, to the memory of standing on my back porch weeks later after I'd gotten home. But somewhere in the process of that writing, it occurred to me that what I was trying to do was move forward. And the idea, as I thought through it, was I'm never truly going to bounce back from the loss of my mom. That was my first gut punch of a loss on a deep level. I had never lost anybody that close in that inner circle. And it's your mom, right? So I never felt like I'm truly going to bounce back, because life is different now. But maybe I bounce forward. And that was the idea of it. So the writing it down was a way of honoring my mom with my words, capturing her story, but also trying to make sense of my own grief. And I know my mom wasn't coming back, but if it was baby steps that helped me move toward the 100, it felt like I was doing the work. And to this day, I read what I wrote every year on her anniversary of her death. Now, bounce back, bounce forward. Maybe it's just semantics, but because everybody goes through it differently, hey, whatever works, right?
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, and so what's like the writing it down? I think that also relates to, just what you were saying about being willing to fully experience it. That's the opposite of that box. It's like, I'm going to really be in touch with what I'm feeling, what I'm experiencing, how I'm going through this. So when you look back on it in a year, have you gotten different perspectives from it? Like, I'm just curious on like how you feel it's benefited you the most.
It hurts less. I didn't say it doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
I still get the tears. I could tear up right now just talking about it, but I find more smiles than I find tears, even 12 years later. So to me, again, it goes back to, I honored her story and my dad's story as well. When my dad passed away, I did the exact same thing for him. And so I have these two documents of, tumultuous times in my life, but maybe we're talking about helping your kids. I think if my kids need to think about resilience, here's a document they could read through, and maybe there's something from this that helps them think about a loss they go through. So it's still meaningful. It still resonates with me. It's still, it's still my mom, still my dad,
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered the question, but that's kind of where I went.
Yeah. I mean, I never have thought about doing it in that way. But there's so much research around the importance of just the act of writing, like not just the act of writing things down and capturing them, and how much that can help you learn and grow, to your point, and move forward. I just had never thought about applying it to a loss. I think sometimes we're so into the experience, we don't think about capturing the experience, but I love that. I mean, I could see how that could provide so much value, because I've looked back on notes and songs from, people I've lost before. But you start to lose details of it. So that capturing it in the moment, I think would be so much more powerful. Honestly.
It's never going to be as fresh as it is right then.
Yeah.
It's just like made a note to make sure we talked about details, because it is in the details. When somebody tells you, you have permission to feel whatever you feel. Well, I don't know what I feel. I mean, it's all kind of like up around here, and I have no way to bring it down. But writing it down, and just don't overthink it. Don't over-engineer it. You just put the words down, and then you can go back and edit it. Like I would still go back and edit it periodically, not to change the intent or the content of it.
Yeah.
But, just a little word here or there, just a different phrase that brings it to life. But then it's there, and I can always go back and revisit it and see how I've evolved. Do I feel different? To your question earlier, do I feel different about it? How have I moved forward, bounced forward?
Oh, I love that. That's a really good strategy. And that gives you something to do with all your energy and feelings in that moment. I think sometimes that's so hard. You have all these things you're feeling, and that could be, to your point, a loss of a person, a loss of a job, a loss of a dream that is something you thought you were going to do. Like, you're having all these feelings and emotions, and like, what do you do with them all? I think writing them down could be something you do with it. And then at least you've captured it. So to your point, I can go back to the details later, learn, and almost see my journey. I think that would be really interesting to see my journey.
You can plot it. You can almost plot it. Like, here's where I was at this moment. Ooh, this is how far these are my 5 steps forward. Ooh, there's my 2 steps back.
Yes. There'd be a lot of learning in that, for just how, just our own self-awareness on how we go through things. That could be, that's super interesting. I love that idea.
There are a lot of great songs that have been written from that free flow of, things written down. There's a lot of songwriters out there. Whoever you are listening out there, you don't have to be good at it. Just get it down. If it's useful for you, there's some richness in it for sure.
Oh, yeah. Jeff's a musician, for those who don't know it. So I've been I've been trying to work on my own guitar skills to one day play a song with you, but I've definitely taken those 2 steps forward, like 10 steps back. So it's a long time coming, by the way. But yes, I could see how that, just the emotion of it, could turn into music, poetry, a story, a book. Like, I could see how, because it's such intensity in our life that we don't have in many other places. I could see how that could turn into some creative work. I could get that. It's progress. I mean, it's just the fact of writing it down is a step to doing the work. To me, that's an example of facing, even if you're standing at 0 or 0.1, I mean, you're still facing toward 100 by putting it down. It's an action. It's an activity. Yes.
It's something tangible.
I love that. So let me ask you this. I'd mentioned this to you that, I've read a couple of posts from people, or editorials kind of things, where people say they don't want to be resilient. Like, they don't want to have to bounce back from difficulties. They really are trying to create a life of ease, like, how can I have less adversity, less tolerance for adversity, so I don't, need to be resilient. So I'm curious on your thoughts on that. I've just read a few posts from people around, like, what would you say about that concept?
So a couple things come to mind. And one, I think some people who don't want to be resilient are intentionally doing that too. And I think some of us, we get defined by our pain, by the event that somebody did something to me. And that becomes my identity. But that's not really what you're talking about here. But I'm not sure I completely understand the notion of it, because I think when I thought about this question, I think life is complicated. You were saying it earlier. I feel pretty blessed to be on the path that I'm on, but I don't know that I'd always call it a path of ease. I still have a hard time getting out of my own way. But all of us have issues. There is nobody who's issue free. There's bumps everywhere, right? So, but maybe the life of ease is the ability to not sweat the small stuff. You know, maybe it's taking a healthy look at the issues. I'm just going to maybe it's putting it in the box on the shelf. Like, I don't have to deal with it. So that's a life of ease. I don't have to deal with it. Or maybe it's about leaning on, or having and leaning on good support systems that offer you insight of different perspectives. Or frankly, I just don't understand the question.
Well, you know what? I'll tell you one thing that came to mind when you were talking that I thought about this is, one way to not have to be as resilient is like when you were saying this idea of, one thing resilient people do is think, like look out the screen door, like you think before you jump. If you were, if I'm in the habit of jumping, that's going to require a lot of swimming and resilience. Like I'm kind of putting myself in situations we can inadvertently, I think kind of what we're saying, you can inadvertently put yourself in situations that require you now to be resilient. I can sign up for too many things. I can, you know what I mean? I could actually, one of our mutual friends said this one time, it's kind of like setting the fire and then being the fireman, the firefighter to come out and put it out. Like, can I just stop setting the fires maybe? And then I'll have to get on this fire truck and go put it out. So part of it is like what we control. And I think part of it is, to your point, our mindset about the things we face and what we decide to take on. Maybe I decide to your point, I'm not sweating the small stuff. And so I'm not dealing with these things. I'm not going to let these things kind of become problems for me, because I don't, I know that's going to require me to be resilient and to, have to challenges. Like, I just don't want that in my life. So anyway, I think in reading some of the editorials, I was just curious. It's not like it's in the research or anything. It's just, I think it's born from people having gone through so much in the pandemic and, everything, racial equality, all that stuff that people are like, I'm tired, basically. And so the idea of resilience feels like too much
work.
Yeah.
I guess the only push I would have that feels healthy until it's not. So my watch out would be, if you can get to that place and you have that pretty box and it sits over here and it's not really going to impact you, that's awesome. But if it's impacting you or your relationships or how you interact with the world around you, then I think there's more work that has to be done. That's my only watch out there.
That's fair. That's fair. So, Jeff, any closing thought before we do the lightning round? Any closing thoughts just about resilience, this topic? Anything you want people to think about? Just any closing thoughts?
You've said it. I think the last few years have been really hard and people are tired. There's been plenty of opportunities to learn about ourselves and pressure test your ability to bounce forward. I mean, you don't have to look far. There's a lot of us who are just like, okay, to your point, I'm just tired. But it doesn't mean you didn't experience a loss or some hardship, but you're still here to talk about it. Like, the fact that we're still here should count for something. Whether it was a baby step or a big step, you made it to this point. And maybe when we reflect on those moments and what we've been through, you're stopping to think, maybe I'm more resilient than I thought I was. Some days, some moments are still going to be hard, but in those moments and that self-talk, just turn the volume up on the angels. Make sure you do equal justice to what you are good at, in addition to the things you're struggling with and that negative self-talk. Just be balanced in both.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. We've all to your point, we're still here. We've all made it through a lot. We all have some level of resilience, or we wouldn't be where we are right now, able to talk and converse, listen to this podcast, whatever we're doing right now, we wouldn't be able to do that. So if we can learn from that, maybe that helps us move forward into what we really want. Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Perfect.
So okay, before you leave, I want to do the lightning round, which is just to help the audience get to know you better. So these are just quick answers, 3 quick questions. So whatever you got.
Right.
The first one is, what's the most unique work experience that you've had?
I would say moving from talent management. So for most of my career, I've been in the talent management space, executive coaching, succession planning stuff, to moving to an HR business partner role. By the way, in the middle of a pandemic. Like, I don't think I've ever experienced anything like that, but the things that it taught me, the resilience that I feel like I had to tap into and do the work that I'm preaching about here. That's what I would say is the most interesting, and probably it's the one thing I'll think back on in my career that I'm most proud of.
Wow, that's awesome. I love that it's something new and something that will be kind of a pivotal moment in your career. That just, it's a reminder.
Be taught new tricks, right? That's
I love that. Okay. So what is one thing you do consistently to enjoy your life?
I play guitar, so within arm's reach, there's always some sort of instrument close by that I might try to learn something, write a new song, play with the kids. They're not little anymore, but connect with them, doing a FaceTime now, going to events with them, playing golf if I can. Those are the things that I really try to make sure I'm enjoying. I connect with Leslie, my wife, and I, just make sure that we're not quite empty nesters yet, but we're halfway there. So just all of that connection. I'm in a good place.
That's good. That's good. I know I should have had a song at the end of this podcast. I didn't think about requesting that. It might be a little too late for that. So next time. Okay. And what is a word of wisdom or piece of advice that you live by?
I'd say you're 1 or 2 people away from getting anything you want or need, but you just need to know who they are and what to ask them. I put that in a song years ago. It came out of me just in a random way, and I'm like, that's pretty good. Let me make a note of that. But I think there are people around us everywhere, and they have some insight that we don't have. And if you're 1 or 2 people in that circle, or somebody you haven't even met yet, there's probably something that you need or you want that helps you see the world a little differently, but you got to know what to ask them and who they are.
I love that. That's a challenge to try. Yeah. If it's something you need, insight you're searching for, start asking for it. Yeah, I could see that. I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining. I appreciate your time and your insights and your just thoughts on how we can be more resilient, and how we can support others, as they're going through tough times as well. I super appreciate it. And for everyone on the podcast, we'll put Jeff's LinkedIn in the show notes so you can connect with him. You can always find me on Instagram, Arlene _pace_green. Thank you all so much for joining, and be well.